Halloween is today a popular day for children in many parts of the world. It is also the most important day of the entire year for Satanists and occultists. Halloween is derived from the pagan Celtic feast of Samhain, also pronounced Samhain or something like that, which was celebrated on October 31st and November 1st. The pagan Celts believed that at this particular time of the year, the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead and other spirits, it was the thinnest. So that was why they believed that at this particular time of the year, the dead, as well as elves and fairies and other spirits, they would manifest themselves among the living. But from a Christian perspective, we realize, of course, that these so-called dead and other spirits, they are really demons. The Catholic Church tried to Catholicize the Feast of Samhain by turning the 2 days into All Hallows Eve and All Hallows Day, also known as All Saints Day. All Hallows Eve became Hallows Even, which became Halloween. Irish immigrants then brought Samhain, Halloween, to the United States, and it was where it evolved into what we today know as Halloween, with children dressing up as in scary and demonic costumes, and the demonic jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, and putting up spider webs and mock skeletons and so forth. Anyone who's trying to follow the God of the Bible and has done a minimum of study into the origins of Halloween will know that it is deeply demonic, and it is something that every Christian should shun like the plague and never allow their children to participate in. The high priest of the Church of Satan in San Francisco and the author of the Satanic Bible, Anton Chandler LaVey, even said that, quote, "I'm glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night out of the year. Welcome to Halloween," unquote. Halloween's connection to the lost 10 tribes of Israel. The 10 northern tribes of the Kingdom of Israel were invaded and deported by the Assyrian Empire around 721 BC. The reason was that they had seceded from the royal house of David and Solomon in Jerusalem approximately 931 BC, and after that they had continually worshipped pagan gods and goddesses. A minority of the 10 tribes did continue to worship the God of Israel, but as a nation and as whole tribes, they worshipped pagan gods and goddesses. So when the 10 tribes of Israel were deported to northern areas of the Assyrian Empire, they were still worshipping pagan gods and goddesses. Now the interesting thing is that one of the pagan deities worshipped in the area around ancient Israel was called Baal Samim, which means the Lord of Heaven. Now the name of this pagan deity is very similar to the name of the Celtic Irish pagan deity Baal Samim or Baal Samhain, whose Feast of Samhain has morphed into what we today know as Halloween. Yair Davidi, an Orthodox Jewish author of numerous books on the lost 10 tribes of Israel, writes in the book Ancestry, The Hebrew Identity of Celtic Races from 2015, we quote, "In Ireland, the supreme god was known as Baal, meaning Baal, or as Baal Samhain, which name is paralleled by that of the Syrian god Baal Samim, whose name in Hebrew, Baal Shamayim, means Lord of Heaven," unquote. It is therefore possible that the 10 tribes brought along the worship of Baal Samim out of the land of Israel into the place of their exile and all the way to Ireland, where deported Israelites, especially of the tribe of Dan, ended up. Charles Valency. Most pagan and secular writers claim that the primary quote-unquote culprit responsible for demonizing Samhain was the British Lieutenant Colonel Charles Valency, who was the British military surveyor of Ireland in the late 18th century, who also became an expert on Irish history, philology and antiquities. Charles Valency wrote that Samhain was a feast to the Lord of Death, one of the Celtic Irish gods of death. But today the most repeated claim is that Samhain was merely a summer's end feast, where the light half of the year gave way to the dark half of the year. Now the funny thing is that in our last video, The Lost 10 Tribes of Israel in Europe, part 2, one of the last parts was about Celtic Hebrew similarities. And there we quoted Charles Valency because the topic of one of his books, Essay on the Antiquity of the Irish Language, being a collation of the Irish with the Punic language from 1772, was that he believed that the Irish were descended from so-called Phoenicians, and that the Celtic Irish language was a mixture of Carthaginian, Phoenician, and Celtic. In the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel in Europe, part 2, we also showed that many Israelite Danites traveled with the Phoenicians, and that Danites and Phoenicians therefore often were looked upon as one people. We quote from Charles Valency's book. On a collation of the Irish with the Celtic, Punic, Phoenician, and Hebrew languages, the strongest affinity, nay, a perfect identity in very many words, will appear. It may therefore be deemed a Punic Celtic compound, and the following essay will prove this to be somewhat more than a bare conjecture. The Irish is consequently the most copious language extant, as from the Hebrew proceeded the Phoenician, from the Phoenician, Carthaginian or Punic was derived the Aeolian, Dorian and Etruscan, and from these was formed the Latin. The Irish historians do all agree that they received their letters from the Phoenicians and that their language was called Beala Fene, or the Phoenician dialect, of which the ancient manuscripts bear sufficient testimony. Unquote. Charles Valency, Essay on the Antiquity of the Irish Language, being a collation of the Irish with the Punic language. Conclusion. All this is, of course, not proof that there is a link between Halloween and the pagan gods worshipped by the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel. But whether or not there is a link between the pagan gods worshipped by the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel and Samhain-Halloween, God-fearing Christians should not participate in Halloween. The God of Israel, quote-unquote, divorced the 10 tribes of Israel because they kept on worshipping pagan gods, and we read about that in the prophet Hosea chapter 1 in the Old Testament. And one of those pagan gods that the 10 tribes of Israel worshipped, it may very well have been Baal Samim, whose feast may have turned into Samhain-Halloween. If the modern-day descendants of the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel keep on not following Christ, and celebrating Halloween is one way of saying no to Christ, then they will likewise be judged by the God of Israel, just like ancient Israel and Judah were